desire today is to ensure that our voters here in Cobb County have the ability for their vote to be counted. And I'm pleased to know that we are making progress towards that end. As chairwoman of Cobb County, it is not my role to direct the process, but I am here to advocate for our citizens and to provide resources to ensure that we are taking steps towards resolving the issues that have been playing themselves out over the past few days. And I have confidence that we will be able to make sure that everyone has the ability to vote and that their vote will be counted. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tori Silas, and I'm the chair of the Cobb County Board of Elections and Registration. Like Chairwoman Cupid, I am tasked with ensuring that all Cobb County registered voters have the opportunity to cast their votes and to do so in a manner in which they choose. I will note for you, obviously you've read all of the media about this. I've been working very closely with our director, Janine Eveler. Upon becoming aware of the situation, all board members, myself included, were made aware of the circumstance with respect to a limited number of ballots, absentee ballots, that were not mailed. We began having conversations as to how we would best put those impacted voters in a position to cast a ballot such that their voices are heard. That's their constitutional right. And in addition to that, have worked closely with her and her staff over the course of the weekend to put that plan into place. I'm happy to answer questions at a later time, but I think at this time it's appropriate to turn it over to Daniel.
I'm happy to give an update. My name is Daniel White. I am the attorney for the Cobb County Board of Elections. Just by way of an update on the process for resolving this, as you know, several individual plaintiffs and an organization filed a lawsuit over the weekend that was docketed this morning. And just so you know, the county was already preparing to address this with its own legal action. We were going to ask the court for relief. So this is something we were working on our own, but we were happy to work with these plaintiffs and with the organizations that filed the suit to come up with what we think is the best solution we can. We had a hearing in front of Judge Hill this morning. The parties worked together before that to try to come up with how do we wanted to identify the voters affected. We wanted to identify which ones had already been mailed ballots, which ones hadn't overnighted, and figure out the best way to get them notice of the deficiency in a ballot if we could, and also some solutions for how they can vote either with a regular ballot or by what's called a federal write-in absentee ballot, a FWAB, which is something that is typically sent to overseas voters who don't get their ballots in time, but can be used. And we asked the court to let us use it in this emergency situation. The judge considered our positions this morning. Both sides came together and said we want to work out a consent order. We worked before the hearing. We worked for another hour or two afterwards to get the appropriate numbers and the appropriate list of voters affected together and the language correct. And we have, just before coming in here, I got authority to submit it to the court from my board. We have to get that approval, but we have submitted that to the court. The court hasn't entered it to our knowledge and would have the authority to change it if she saw fit, but as of 10 minutes ago, the plaintiffs in this action and the county defendants came to an agreement and submitted a consent order, and we're hopeful the court will enter that order. The basics of that order are that the roughly 716 is the highest number of affected voters that we come to, voters that we first identified that have not since, or at least as of earlier this weekend, had not come in to vote early. They were sent, I believe, and Janine can give you, she's got even more updated numbers than I did, but we took the highest number we could come up and said, those are the affected voters. We're going to give them notice and let them know that if they vote their absentee ballot that's been overnighted to them, it still has to be sent by tomorrow. We can't accept votes that aren't postmarked by tomorrow, but if they can submit their ballot by tomorrow, we've asked the court to extend the deadline until November 14th, which is tied to that overseas voter deadline. That's a federal law. We thought that was fair to have them come in by next Monday. And so we use that as the date. That would be a day before the certification meeting. And so that would mean all absentee ballots would still have to be submitted by tomorrow. We're not talking about people being able to vote after Election Day. You still have to send them by tomorrow. But there is a subset, a group that has already been mailed overnight with UPS with return envelopes. There was a smaller group this morning that we were coming to court saying we want to narrow this number down and let you know. We've since, Janine has checked, I believe, and staff has checked, and that number has come all the way down to 276 voters who either have not already been, as of this morning, had not already been sent an overnight envelope with their ballot, or have not come in to vote early in person. So some of the affected individuals just went ahead and came on in, and we hated that they had to do that. We want voters to be able to choose how they want to vote. We wanted to make it as convenient as possible. This was just a purely clerical error. You know, I know Janine's sick about it and the staff's sick about it. But as I said in court this morning, as former DA Vic Reynolds used to say, if you mess up, we fess up. We were being transparent. We said, as soon as we discovered this, we did all we could to determine what the numbers were, who was affected, how we can get them ballots as quickly as possible. And so we, from the moment we found out about it, have literally been all hands on deck. You know, these board members aren't staff members, they're volunteers, and they've been up here helping to do this. And so I'm proud of my board members for doing that. They've literally been present and helping to address this issue because they feel that responsibility. But as of about 15 minutes ago, we sent the court a proposed order for her to hopefully enter, where we are going to send the remaining voters who haven't already voted or received their ballots overnight, and then we'll also send them, we're going to send them an email notification letting them know they may vote using the FWAB, if the federal write-in absentee ballot, if they don't receive their actual ballot in time to send it out tomorrow. And they also still have the option to vote in person on voting day, and they can come in and they can cancel their absentee ballot, or which may have, I think some of them have already done that, or may have already been done, and they can vote in person tomorrow. So that's the solution we came up with the attorneys for the plaintiffs, and I think it covers everything the best we could, given the time. Both sides acknowledge that the votes have to be cast by tomorrow. That's a legal threshold. Nobody was prepared to say is that you can vote after Election Day. So that was the time constraint we were working with, is one business day to get this done, and we've done the best we can with the consent order that we've submitted. So I'll let.
And once we get the judge to sign the order, we'll get it out to you as soon as possible. And anybody got any questions?
Do you have the numbers, exact numbers that he was referring to about how many voters, I guess, were sent ballots and how many were?
So as I shared, upon learning of this situation, we were working with Janine, Ms. Evler, to really identify those voters that were impacted. And those voters that were impacted, as we've previously shared, were voters that noted an issue date for their absentee ballots on October the 13th and October the 22nd. So with respect to those absentee ballots that were overnighted over the course of the weekend, 164 ballots were that noted an issue date of October the 22nd were overnighted over the weekend. 37 of those were overnighted to addresses out of state. 127 were overnighted to addresses in state. With regard to absentee ballots that noted an issue date of October the 13th, 83 of those ballots were overnighted out of state. And they do, and that's, thank you so much. With respect to those absentee ballots that were overnighted to out-of-state addresses, each were provided a prepaid return label such that they could return that ballot to us.
There's one thing I didn't quite catch. You said there were 200 and some odd that 716 that were overnighted out, is that correct? It was actually him saying it, and then
Yeah.
there were 200 some odd that weren't. What was the reason for the 200? And I jotted down 216, but I think I might have got the 16 from the previous number.
You got to start with the 469.
So what we're gonna, I'll see if I can start from the highest number and walk you down to where we got to the number. The initial finding was that there could be up to 1,036 voters affected. That was just a look at who had been issued ballots on that day, and that had not been voted at the time that the issue was discovered. Then follow-up was done to determine, okay, of those 1,036 potential affected voters, some of these have already come in to vote, either in person, they've gotten their advance, and some voters may have just canceled their original request and re-requested, but by some means they had already been able to vote, either by absentee or in person. So that got us down to a possible affected voters as of, to the best of our knowledge over the weekend, of 716 voters that were possibly affected that may not have received their ballot, or and not only hadn't received it but hadn't come in to do their vote, like they hadn't come in to cast their vote in person or by absentee through another request. There is a subset of that, which the dates we sent all of them out was the 10.
That was October the 22nd.
So all the voters who were identified on the October 22nd list, the smaller group, were mailed. They were overnighted their ballots with a return envelope, and that was 100 and.
It was a total of 164.
164 voters that should have been processed on the 22nd, mailed out on the 22nd, have been overnighted their ballots. There was a larger group on October 13th, and if you think about it, that's earlier in the election cycle, and it's one of the first dates they would have started receiving and processing ballots. So there was a larger number that were affected. Of that group, everybody with an out-of-state address we went ahead and sent them a UPS overnight envelope with the return address, and that was, what was the out-of-state?
83.
83 of those people from, as of this weekend, 83 people who were out of state from that batch of voters that were processed on 10/13 were sent there. And then there was another.
As of last evening, it was 469.
So as of last evening, there was a total of what we thought could be 469 voters affected. We have since gone through and reconciled even more to see more people have come in and with their advance in-person number. So the 276 number represents people who may have been affected, who have, not come in and cast their ballot in person, either advanced in person or haven't requested another ballot and already gotten it and cast it that way, and who we have not already overnighted. So everybody else other than those 276 voters has already either had a ballot overnighted to them with a return envelope, and in the court order today, we committed to sending those out, along with an email that says you can cast your ballot. If you don't receive it tomorrow and get in time to get it out tomorrow, you can cast it with this federal write-in absentee ballot.
So that 276 are going to be overnighted to them?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you go into a little bit more detail on exactly how this happened, and then how confident are you that it was only these 1,000 or so ballots?
I think, Janine, do you want to take a step? Janine and her staff have done the work on sort of the process of what happened, and then also how they verified.
Hello, everyone. I'm Janine Evler, Elections Director for Cobb County. So the way it works is a list of voters with mailing addresses that were issued in the system, in the state registration system, are collected each day in a spreadsheet and then downloaded to a flash drive. That drive is entered into our mailing machine, and then the ballots come out packaged, ready to mail. There is one person that is the supervisor over that operation, and she had the flash drive but failed to actually run it through the machine. So the ballots appeared to be issued because they were marked in the system as issued, but the final step of actually running it through the machine did not happen. So the ballots never were packaged up and sent. So it was actually completely human error.
And then how confident are you that this was the only mistake here?
We have statistics showing ballots being returned from all the other ballot runs, so they must have gone out.
The ballots that we know were not sent out, were they from a centralized location of the county, or were they from all over the county?
All over the county and out of state.
Some of the Democrats have said that the SB 202, you can't mail them out as early as you used to be able to, and they can't request them as early as previously. So do you agree that that was a factor?
Well, I do agree that the time frame has been compressed. It is more difficult to get the number of ballots out in the short time that we have, 22 days, 25 days, instead of what we used to have as 45 days.
The other thing we've heard a lot about is staffing. Do you know off the top of your head how many vacancies your department has? And could you speak at all to why elections is having trouble hiring or retaining people? Is it, it's under a lot of scrutiny.
Yes, obviously. We have been more successful at hiring since our commissioners have changed the pay scale. But in the last 2 years, since 2020 elections, 38% of my staff is new to elections, to Cobb County, or new to their position. So I have a very young staff in tenure, and they're learning, and so that has been part of the problem.
And the people that left, is it true that you had several, I guess, high-level deputies leave? And if so, what was the reason, they said?
So at the end of 2021, the registration and absentee ballot manager, the supervisor, and all of the third level all left. So we had only really just people who were the worker bees, for lack of a better word. So we had to build up that leadership team again. And as far as why they left, many of them stated overwork, too much pressure, their own lives were suffering with the extra workload.
What do you say to people who may, I guess, be questioning, I guess, your staff's ability to, I guess, follow through with this, I guess, consent order as well as handle tomorrow's election? Because we're going to see high turnout, it looks like. So what do you say to people who may be, I guess, questioning the department and the county's ability to sort of, handle the increased people who are coming to vote?
The staff is working very hard because we know that there's an important election coming up tomorrow, and we also have this court order to implement. There are always mandates with election work. So we're very used to having strict deadlines, and we have to get it done, and we will.
Have you heard if the state, Secretary of State office is going to be looking into this or anything, or have you heard anything like that, or?
I'm sure that there will be a state election board investigation, yes.
What kind of accountability measures are in place for the people responsible for this error?
At this point, we're really not looking at that. We know how it happened, but we still need all of our staff in place. There will be some work on what happens next after we get through the election.
Can you describe what fell through in the process, why thousands of other people got these absentee ballots, but this group of 1,000 somehow did not?
Like I said earlier, it was not following through with the entire process. It was everybody thinking you have the flash drive with all the data, it's being run, and the person just didn't follow through.
So it was one person?
Yes.
Have they been trained further? Are they in another position right now? What are they doing?
Again, we are going to hold off on any of those kind of decisions until we get through the election, and then we'll see what we need to do. We do know that we need some tighter procedures so that it isn't up to one person, that there's a back-end process for checking that has been done.
What's your message to the voters now?
Well, we're so sorry to these voters. I mean, we're sick about it, as Daniel said. The employee who was responsible is sick about it. She's in tears all the time. So we are very upset. This has never happened to us, and we just want to make it right.
So on a technical level, how do you ensure when you get those ballots back that, like, if you get one after November 8th, is there a code that's scanned? Is there a return address to ensure this is one of those 200? Well, I got my numbers all mixed up. But is this one of these? Make sure it's one of the impacted voters and not just someone who.
Correct. So we have a defined list. We know the names of the people that this affects. And so anything that's received after the election day, in the same way that the overseas and military ballots that come back after election day, we will have the names of those people and the people that are affected in this order. And so we'll be able to apply the new extended deadline.
One thing too, I want to, Daniel, while you're standing here, and you may have mentioned this, I apologize if you didn't, that along with the consent order, there's an extension of the deadline for those voters to get their ballot back in.
No, let me clarify. It will be hopefully in the consent order. The extension is for the ballots to be received. All parties agree that the ballots have to be voted by tomorrow. That's a pretty hard and fast election law principle. We don't cast votes after election day. So we're doing everything we can to get through this consent order to get ballots in the hands of voters today, the affected voters, so that they can cast them tomorrow, whether that's by overnighting them if they receive those, or by postmarking and sending in the federal, the FWAB ballot. So we've given them, that really leaves three options. If they're able to come in and vote in person, they can do that at their polling place tomorrow. Or they can vote their absentee ballot if they've received one that we've sent out to the list of affected voters, or hopefully if the last option would be if they don't receive it, they could print out what's called a federal write-in absentee ballot, and they could fill that out and send it in. They would all have to be postmarked by tomorrow. That's just a principle of election law. That's not. We wouldn't feel comfortable going to court after the election. Or he didn't feel comfortable asking the court for an extension past voting day. But we do, because we allow that extra time for military and overseas voters for their ballots to come in. That's a federal law. We felt like that was an appropriate deadline for these voters who were affected not by their own delay or by a post office delay, a third-party delay, but by a staff error. We thought this was a good equitable remedy to say, let's give these folks who were affected by the actions of our workers to have that extra time for their ballot to get there. So if they send it tomorrow, typically if you send in your ballot today or tomorrow, it's not going to get here in time, for it to be counted. But we wanted to ask the court for permission to consider ballots received by November 14th.
And just to confirm, that has not been granted by the judge yet?
No, not that I'm aware of. All parties have consented to it, and I've checked my email a couple times here to see.
There's a couple of tweets out there, but
Okay.
I'm guessing they're wrong.
And yes, no, there have been some headlines saying the judge orders it. The judge asked us to submit an order. We have submitted an order. I'm confident that within the next, by the close of business, there will be an order issued, and we'll provide a copy.
What more can the county or elections office do to rectify the situation?
We've done everything we can. I mean, we're up against, there's only so many minutes in a day, and we've done everything we could possibly do, and they've really gone, both the staff and the board members have gone over and above and taken an all-hands-on-deck approach to fix this mistake once they found it, and they won't stop until we get them out.
This won't happen again.
I think what.
You said this was a two-pronged step. How do you make sure that this becomes foolproof the next time around?
Well, I don't think that anything is ever completely foolproof, but as Ms. Eveler has suggested, we are presently focused on administering the election. Obviously, tomorrow is Election Day. our voters have the opportunity to participate in advance in-person voting. Obviously, they can submit absentee ballots, but as was noted earlier, we feel that there will be a large turnout tomorrow, and so that indeed needs to be our focus. That by no means is to suggest that we are not focused on these 1,036 voters, as suggested by us sending absentee ballots via overnight delivery to them, participating in this process, working alongside with plaintiffs' counsel to come to an agreement with regard to a consent order. My understanding is those 276 some odd ballots are presently being printed so that they can be overnighted to those impacted voters, and they have an effective opportunity. With regard to what may happen in the future, once we get past this election, we have our certification that will take place on November the 15th. At our Cobb Board of Elections meeting. We will then turn our attention to putting really an assessment, looking at our processes, and putting any type of prophylactic measures in place.
We're talking about 1,000 people that this situation affected. With races becoming so much tighter, seemingly in Georgia in recent memory, what kind of significance do those 1,000 voters have if a fraction of them, half of them, can't even vote?
Well, I mean, given the numbers that we've provided, a portion of them have already voted. So again, the 1,036 are those that were noted as having an issue date for their absentee ballot on October the 13th and October the 22nd. Through our own diligence, through our own communication with these voters and their responses back to us, some of them are letting us know that they have voted, hence the reason why the number that was last evening, 469 voters that had not yet received a ballot, has been reduced to 276 that we need to send a ballot to, because we've looked at the absentee in-person voting data from late last week, in addition to individuals that during this interim time period canceled that initial request, subsequently requested another ballot within the appropriate time frame, and they've cast that ballot.
So 276 remain outstanding as not having gotten an absentee ballot?
And they will receive one tomorrow.
Have you spoken to all the 276 voters to make sure that they know their situation?
As Mr. White noted, part of the consent order that's yet to be approved by the judge includes information or includes a requirement that we do outreach and we will provide notice. However, over the course of the weekend, we sent emails to all of the individuals, actually all of the individuals, one that received ballots that were overnighted, advised them on how they could go in and either cast their ballot in the location, in addition providing our contact information, as well as advise those individuals, then it was 469 that had not received a ballot, that they would need to go into their assigned polling precinct to cast their ballot. And then we'll continue to reach out to this now 276 to advise them of that a ballot is being, and the fact that that ballot must be postmarked tomorrow, notwithstanding the fact it can be received as late as next Monday, November the 14th, but it must be postmarked tomorrow, as Mr. White has made reference to.
Have they responded? The ones that you reached out, have they responded?
Which
The 276?
we haven't reached out to them. We left the court and came directly here to speak with you all.
And they can still drop them off at the ballot drop box?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
Do you expect anyone to be fired or face any other disciplinary action?
As Director Eveler made mention of, that's not presently on our to-do list. That's not even what we're thinking about. We're making certain that we are in a position, one, to ensure that these voters have the opportunity to cast their vote. In addition to that, we all have an election to administer tomorrow. That's what our focus is.
Given tomorrow and the next day and how incredibly busy, obviously, all of you are going to be, have there been any modifications that are in process that would normally take one person that will now be taking two people? Any point along the way where this kind of thing, a flash drive can get slipped in someone's pocket and forgotten, and there isn't a check and balance like you're going to address after? My concern is beginning this moment and through tomorrow and the next day, they're very easily being understaffed, could be hot spots where this kind of thing could easily happen. Do you all have two-person verifications in place for actual election day activities? Are there other spots where one person takes a flash drive and takes it to a machine without a second person? obviously not specifically for mail-in ballots, but for anything else along the way, coming from a polling location. Can you address those kinds of securities?
Yes, all the processes for Election Day, you have to have a chain of custody for everything that's transported, and everything that's transported, including ballots or memory cards that contain the electronic version of the ballot, they all require more than one person to transport. So those processes have been in place, and they work well, and they are the same processes every election that we use.
With staffing being reduced, does that affect any of those chain of custody kinds of concerns?
On Election Day, we are fully staffed. Our poll workers, we've received lots of new requests for poll workers, and so our polls will be fully staffed, and there shouldn't be any problem with staffing on that case.
You said that there was, the unsent ballots were scattered across the county. Were there any precincts that were, where there was particularly large clusters of the unsent ballots, or was it, that's probably not your priority right now, figuring that
Yes,
out.
sir.
But,
We know that we need to, because I'm sure that the candidates that lose in tight races are going to want to know that. So again, it's one of those things that's on the top of the list as soon as we get through the election.
Is there a concern because you're waiting for the courts to hand down the order that you might not have enough time to get a hold of all these 276 individuals?
We are working on getting the ballots ready and getting the packaging ready for overnight delivery. We do have a lot of their emails, and we will be crafting an email notification this afternoon.
All right. As soon as the judge signs the order, I'll send it out to the same email list I sent it here. If you have another email you want me to send that to, just hit me up right afterwards. Appreciate you all coming out. We'll be milling around here if you have any follow-ups. Thanks.